Welcome and thank you for listening to the Sales Maven Show. I'm your host, Nikki Roush. I'm your own personal sales maven here to offer you tips and strategies and techniques to master your sales conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about how to set boundaries in sales conversations, how to redirect and refocus potential clients, especially in those instances where there is a potential crossing of boundaries due to a friendship. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I want to thank you for being here. And let's dive in. So, this particular episode is going to have a few different language suggestions in here to give you some different ways to say things. Now, of course, when I give you a language suggestion, it doesn't mean that that's the only way. It's just to spur the idea for you of what would feel natural and authentic for you to say so you can come up with your own version. Of course, if you like the language suggestion that I give, by all means, take it. It's yours. Please utilize it in your conversations. And sometimes you think, well, Nikki, I don't talk like that. And that's okay. Sometimes it's nice to just have a framework to start from so then you can tweak from there. So that is the objective in giving you so many different ways to say some of the things that I'm going to say today in this particular episode. So I want to start by making sure that you always understand kind of what the objective is. So this comes from my background in neurolinguistic programming, where we always learned everything always went back to what was the outcome? What was the ultimate goal? Right. And so when you find yourself in these situations where boundaries need to be set because maybe they're being crossed and or you feel like we're spending all this time focusing on the friendly conversation, the personal stuff, and we're never really getting into the heart of the matter. So therefore, how can I really make an impact or help this person achieve what it is that they're saying they want to achieve, because we're never actually doing any of the work. All right. So it's like, what's the outcome? What's the ultimate outcome that you're looking to do here? And then this other kind of piece that can come up is it it can be easy, especially if you're somebody who's a coach or if you've been doing what you've done for a very long time, and I'm assuming that's the case for you. You're an expert. Sometimes it can feel easy to just give advice, even to a friend, on something and and then later realize that they didn't really take your advice, and you might be questioning, maybe they didn't take my advice because they didn't actually pay for it. A friend of mine used to always say, people who pay attention. So if you really want to help make an impact in somebody's life or business, oftentimes they do need to pay for your services or your advice in order for them to actually implement. I have learned that, oh my gosh, it's a constant lesson in my own life, because it can be easy to just give advice. I love to coach. I love to give advice to people. And maybe you do too. So we're not always actually serving the greater good when we do that and don't actually allow people to become paying clients so that they will actually take action, do something, and get results. So, this particular episode came from a coaching call that a client had asked me specifically about a situation where she had somebody where they had a friendship first. Then this person became in need of the services that my client offers, but she was having a really hard time kind of moving it from this like friendly, like just wanting to help and be supportive, to actually getting to the place where this was going to be a paid client. And and again, you might find yourself in these situations. I know I have as well. One thing I did years ago was I put in place these spotlight coaching sessions. They're 15-minute, really intense. Like, we do a lot in 15 minutes. I can actually do quite a bit for people as far as like giving them suggestions, writing scripts, helping them kind of figure out their offer. Like, I can do a lot in 15 minutes. And the reason I put these spotlight coaching sessions into my business and started making them a paid offer was because I was so overwhelmed with so many of the women that I was networking. This was back when I was doing a ton of networking as I was building my business. I had become very friendly with them, and they would do this thing like, "Hey, can I just pick your brain? Hey, Nikki, can you just help me with this one little thing?" And I think one week I had counted and there were like it was like 9 people had asked me that week for like, "Can I just have a little bit of time? Can you just help me with this one thing?" But it was just sucking up so much of my time and days, that it was I was overwhelmed and feeling like I'm not actually doing anything to move my business forward. I'm just helping all these people for free, and it felt out of alignment. Um, and that may be the case for you. So sometimes just having like a really simple offer, because as soon as I put in the spotlight coaching sessions where I would say yes, and that's something that would qualify for a spotlight coaching session, here's the link if you want to book it. And when they would go to book they would have to pay up front. I went from getting like 9 requests a week to having like one, because 8 of those people had no intention on ever paying me any money. And so all of a sudden they were willing to figure it out themselves and or go find somebody else to ask. And which was a win-win, hopefully for them, but also for me, because it just wasn't a time suck anymore. So again, if you find yourself in these situations, which I suspect you probably have, it's learning to have some language to set some boundaries. And you'll know when it doesn't feel good to you, right? Like, I'm not saying don't ever give advice to your friends when they ask for it, or don't ever help people from a place of being generous. That's not the intent here. It's more around where you feel like by helping them, you're actually not helping them, like they're not taking action, they're not moving forward, therefore they need to pay. And or you start to feel a little bit of a resentment, or it starts to feel like I feel like I'm being kind of taken advantage of in some way. That is when you're going to bring these situations and this language that I'm going to give you into the conversation. So one is when you find yourself in that situation where um, somebody wants to take up a lot of the time that you have scheduled. Like, let's say you scheduled a consultation call, or maybe even a paid call. Maybe they have paid you for your time and they're spending the beginning of that call wanting to just like catch up personally. But you don't really have that much time in your schedule, right? Like, if we spend 20 minutes catching up, that's going to run me 20 minutes into the next hour if I'm still giving them the full amount of time they paid for. Or if I have a consultation call scheduled with this person and we're scheduled to chat for 30 minutes and they want to spend 20 minutes like doing a friendly catch up, that only gives us 10 minutes before you have to move on to the next part of your day or your calendar, to actually do the consult. And that's not enough time. So here's my first language suggestion. You could say, I'd love to make sure that we have time to dive into like what we had planned to go through today. So either the consultation or your strategy session or whatever it was that they, had kind of initiated this call from. So let's focus on that right now so I can support your goals. Like, it's just a simple like, I'd love to make sure we have time to dive into whatever it is we're supposed to do today, insert it there. And and so that we focus on how I can best support you in reaching your goals. And then you just redirect the conversation. So this is a nice way of establishing boundaries, but at the same time sending the message of like, we're here to work, or this time is limited, right? Um, that can come up. Now here's another way is this can sometimes happen too, is especially when it's somebody where you've got this friendship, so maybe about their family, or about their friends or their colleagues, or you've got like some history, right? And they want to tell you story. They want to tell you the story before you can actually get into like what the point of the call is. Now, I love story, and story can be a huge time suck, right? People can like eat up all of your time telling a story. I think I've shared this on the podcast before. One time I had met this woman. Actually, we'd been introduced from a we had a colleague in common, and I had asked this woman, or well, she had asked me first on a call, like, tell me a little bit about your background and kind of how you got to where you are today. And so I took about 2 minutes, I think, maybe two and a half, to explain a little bit about my background and why I was doing what I was doing. And then I said, well, how about you? I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and how you got to what you're doing. And she talked for 40 minutes. Now, normally I would have interrupted, but I found myself in this situation of like, this is going to make for a great story. And I've used this story many, many times in many different ways in my business. So I just let her go. But she started not from like, she started from her very first job, right? And then she went through every single job she had had. And so it took her 40 minutes to answer that one question. Well, guess what? Like then our time was just about up of what time we had to scheduled to like chat and talk and like and there was an opportunity actually for her to earn my business. That was kind of the reason for setting up the call, but we never got there. And honestly, after she talked for 40 minutes, like at first I was engaging in the conversation. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, oh, interesting. And then pretty soon I was like, like sending the signal of like, maybe you want to wrap it up. And then pretty soon I just stopped responding and she just kept talking. Like I wasn't giving her any feedback at all. And she just kept talking. So be careful about story. Can be a huge time suck. So here's what you might say in those moments. You might say, that sounds like a really interesting story. But let's shift gears because we do have a limited amount of time today and talk about how we might work together to reach the goals or reach the goal that we had talked about or reach the goal you had set for yourself or reach the goal you had shared on your intake form, right? Like you can change this language up, but like that sounds like a really interesting story. And due to our limited time, let's shift gears and talk about how we can, reach your goals, work together, whatever that is. And then that just kind of sends the message of like, okay, we're moving on from there. And then the other thing that can happen, here's another situation, is you get on a consultation call with somebody. Now, this is why I recommend having a pre-frame at the start of a consult call. This is so crucial. This pre-frame of like setting the stage of like what's going to happen. But I understand, like when you get on calls with somebody for the very first time, you might not just launch right into the pre-frame. You might spend a minute or two, maybe three, connecting. But that connection time can turn into 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour and a half, and you haven't even gotten to that place. So here's some language when you find yourself in that situation. You might say, it's been so fun getting to learn a little bit about you. Now let's jump into the details of, what we would plan to talk about today, or let's jump into, or let's shift gears and talk about XYZ. So what I'm doing here is I'm really saying like I'm being respectful, like it's I get where we were and it's time to transition. So this again, it's about creating boundaries in those situations. And you might find yourself like again, it can be difficult. I'm going to pull this back because the example I just gave you is more if maybe you don't know that person. But if you do know that person, you might change that language a little bit and you might say something like, it's been really fun to catch up and hear a little bit about what's going on. And I know there's so much more. And again, because we have limited time together today, I want to make sure that we get to the purpose of our call. So you just like, okay. So I've acknowledged that we've done that part and now we're shifting gears. So this is about you guiding the conversation because in sales, that is your job, is to be the guide because people will go on and on and on if you let them. And then here's another one for when you have a call with somebody again that you have a personal relationship with. And the purpose of the call is to talk about doing business together. But maybe it's gone a little bit more on the personal side, and it's time to really shift gears. So in this instance, you can also say to that someone, I love our personal time together. It means the world to me. And because we are scheduled to chat about, business today, or we're scheduled to chat about your website or your leadership training or whatever it is, insert your thing there. Maybe we should set up another time to just have a girlfriend like catch up and then focus on, what we had planned to talk about today. So it's a nice way of saying, like, I acknowledge that we have this friendship and we have this time set aside to talk about XYZ. So let's do that and set up another time where we can just like catch up. And then you can do that at the end of the call, right? Like you can say, now let's get a time on our calendars to have a catch up or have lunch or meet for coffee or whatever that is. But making sure that you're keeping your boundaries clear and that it isn't just taking up all the time that you had scheduled for these conversations that actually don't lead down that path to the person hiring you, to them being able to implement the things that you offer and make the changes in their life or their business that they want to make. So remember, it's your job to earn the business. It's your job to guide the conversation. And the more you take action in this and do it in a really kind way. So when I say kind, your voice would depict that, your facial expressions, you might soften a little bit when you say some of the things that I'm saying, and just be patient and let the person transition. And if they feel weird about it, this is a great time, if they act weird about it, to bring in, I know I've talked about this before on the podcast. I talk about it a lot in different trainings about having selective amnesia. It's like acting as if like we're fine. We just move on with the conversation. It doesn't have to be awkward or weird. You just extend yourself, you show your friendly, kind demeanor, and you move on with the conversation and you direct it to the way in the place that it's supposed to be. It shows your professionalism to be able to do that and to send the message of like there is a separation between friendship and the business side of it. And sometimes we need to focus on the business in order for this person to get the results that they want, right? It's you delivering, you and standing in your integrity and delivering on what it is they're paying you for and or saying that they want your support with. All right, so I hope you find this a little helpful and gave you some ideas of some ways for you to set some boundaries with some language, do it in a kind way, and keep yourself on track, keep your schedule on track, keep moving forward in the direction that is going to increase your business so that you can make a bigger impact in the world. Thank you so much for being here, for listening to the podcast, for sharing the podcast. If you liked something about this episode, please give it a shout out. Reach out to me. Let me know what you're going to take away from this and implement. And I'm wishing you continued success in all of your sales conversations. Have a great rest of your day.